This begins our class this week on chapter 14 and 15. Let me get to the top and start with 14. 14 is 33 verses and 15 is 37, if I remember right, verses. So we're looking at 70, right? Quick math skills there. And so I'm only going to just do the two. And I hate for us to run way past the hour like last week. So we'll just see how long this takes. There is a lot of dialogue. I have just a couple of extra things to show, not a whole lot. So we're just going to kind of play with it as we go. And what we need to do first, as we always do, is just scroll up a little bit saying, hey, where did we come from here? What did we talk about last week? And so we have chapter 13. At the end, you know, we had the big death of Ammon by Absalom. And of course, King David was not pleased at all for what Absalom did to Ammon, who of course raped Absalom's sister Tamar. So that's basically where we left off at. And so we scroll to chapter 14, talk about the wise woman from Tekoa. And I'm going to show you where that is here in just a second. Let's just read this first two verses here. Now, Joab, son of Zeruiah, knew how the king felt toward Absalom. So Joab sent to Tekoa and brought from there a wise woman. I guess he had to go out of town to find a wise woman. I just don't know. All right, so let me just show you real quickly where those are and who the relation to some of these people are. Ignore the reason for the map, but it did have it on here, so I kind of grabbed this one. As you know, Jerusalem is right here, if you can see my mouse, and Bethlehem is not too far down from Jerusalem. And then if you come down a little bit further, there is Tekoa. And it's also known from the home of the prophet Amos. And it tells us that in Amos, the book of Amos 1:1. So anyways, so that just gives you an idea that he went from where he was and came down this way to find a wise woman. All right, go back to us. Oh, and I want to show you something too on this family lineage. This is the tree of Jesse, which is funny. Jesse tree? No, I'm just kidding. That we do during Christmas, Advent season. So this has, if you can see my mouse, it has David in the middle here, because here's his pop, Jesse, and all the wives are grouped together over here. And if you look over to the right, this would be Zeruiah, and that is, of course, David's sister. All right, and so coming down, I like the part here where it shows all of David's sons, and I believe they are in birth order, okay? And so you see Amnon, who's been killed, and he would have been more than likely. Now, the king picks, but if he gets that opportunity, but if not, more than likely the eldest son would be the next king. He's gone. Chileab, we're going to hear about him, but I think he's going to be disappearing. Absalom, yeah, gone. But eventually, who becomes king is halfway down the list, and then here's Solomon down this way. So I want to show you that. Also, I want to show you that we're talking about Zeruiah as David's sister, and of course, her son is Joab. And Joab is friends with Absalom. He's about to do him a favor that we're just about to read here in just a minute, as he's going to express in his own certain way with this wise woman from Tekoa. And Joab, again, is the nephew to King David. Okay. All right. Just wanted to kind of set the stage a little bit. There's a couple other names in here. I didn't pull up a whole lot of information about them. We can always hit the information button on the right and read about who they might be. And what's funny, though, I don't see my text box anymore. Well, that's not right. Well, someone's just going to have to yell at me or something. if somebody has a question or what have you. Must have went off when I shared my screen. I'll figure this thing out one day. Whoops, now I got my thing over too far. Sorry. Okay. So then if we can get out of verse 1. So Joab sent Tekoa. Wait. I want to go back to verse 1 because I never even finished it. Now Joab, son of Zeruiah, knew how the king felt toward Absalom. And this is something when I read it through the first time, I just happened to miss that for some reason, because I thought it was one of these times again where someone's trying to tell David, in a special way, this certain message he needs to learn. But and what was the reason for Joab doing this? Was he doing it as a favor to Absalom or what have you? But it does say in here that Joab knew how the king felt about his son. So this is what we're seeing as his motivation to do this with this woman. So he's to the woman, he says this: pretend to be in mourning, put on mourning apparel, do not anoint yourself with oil, so that through all that you may appear to be a woman who has long been mourning someone dead. So look like you're in distraught, and then go to the king and speak to him in this manner. And then of course Joab told her what to say. So instead of having it in scripture twice, they just said, hey, he told her and we're about to hear it. So the woman of Tekoa went to the king and fell to the ground in homage, saying, help, O king. The king said to her, and again, just to let you know, we got all this green. This is all dialogue. So get ready for all that. Okay. I'm scrolling back up. All right. So the king says to her, what do you want? Pretty plain. And she replies, well, alas, I am a widow. Now think about how this story is working, because it's going to be it's a narrative example, if you will, of what's happening between him and Absalom. And Joab is trying to set a stage here for him to see the big picture. And if you notice too, did we not also see that Nathan did the same thing in a certain respect to King David as well, when he told him, there's a man who had a little goat, or a little sheep, and then this rich man took it and killed it and ate it, and David was all furious. Well, this is the same premise where they're trying to, if you will, trick David into realizing what he might need to learn. But this one's a little bit different. This one is not so treacherous. It's not so ill story as much as just trying to get him back with his son Absalom. Okay. So she says, alas, I'm a widow. My husband is dead. And your servant had two sons. She was saying that she had two sons who quarreled in a field. And since she had no husband, basically there was no one to part them from their fight. And one of them struck his brother and killed him. So she's pretending to be a mother without a husband, and one son kills another son. Then the whole clan confronted your servant, who's her, and demanded, give up the one who struck down his brother. So give up that murderer. We must put him to death for the life of his brother whom he killed. You scroll up a little bit. We must not go away with the heir also. We must do away with the heir also. Thus they will quench my remaining hope and leave my husband neither name nor posterity upon the earth. And I think you have an idea what that means. If she has two sons, and one of these sons, at least, if not both of them, had the lineage of their father, and then if she has one son who's now dead, and they kill the other one off, it does a couple things. The lineage of her husband ends, and the other thing is that if he dies also, not only is she now a widow, but there's nothing there for her, and so she might be stranded as well. So it's a very tragic story that she's trying to put on to King David here. So try to get his attention, try to get him to feel for her and what she's trying to tell him. So you got to admit, David's very passionate, right? So if David's really a passionate kind of guy, which I'm sure they figured that out a long time ago, then all they got to do is play on that, and they get his attention. So the king then said to the woman, go home, I will issue a command on your behalf. In other words, I'll take care of that. I'll make sure no one, touches your son. So the woman of Tekoa answered him, upon me and my family be the blame, my lord king. The king and his throne are innocent. In other words, I don't want you to be to blame for all of this. This is my doing. So then the king said, if anyone says a word to you, have him brought to me, and he shall not touch you again. In other words, they will not in any way, shape, or form affect your family. Let me scroll up a little bit. But she said, please let the king remember the Lord your God, that the avenger of blood may not go too far in destruction, and that my son may not be done away with. So he was trying to help her in her situation, but she's trying to convince him, well, let him not kill my son, because I don't want my son to die either. I don't want to be stranded as having no family and everything else. But now I'm saying, please, don't do this to my son. Of course, these people don't exist, right? It's just what she's trying to tell David. And then, and so he replies to her, as the Lord lives, not a hair of your son shall fall to the ground. So he's just been convinced that even though one son killed one brother, killed another brother, that the other brother shall not be punished for this and shall not die for this or whatever else. This is where we got to remember what just happened in the previous chapter. Absalom killed Amnon. Now they had different mothers, but they're both his sons, and killed Amnon. And then now he has sent Absalom off. He doesn't want him to be around at all. He's killed his oldest son. And so this whole thing is going on to get David to bring Absalom back and back into Jerusalem, if you will, or back into Judah. I'll get it right in a minute. So let me scroll up a little bit here. Verse 12. But the woman continued. She's not done yet. Please let your servant say still another word to my lord the king. Wow. And he said, speak. So the woman said, why then do you think the way you do against the people of God? And pronouncing as he has, the king shows himself guilty. In other words, she's saying, aha, I got you. This is what I'm trying to tell you in this story. And pronouncing as he has, the king shows himself guilty and not bringing back his own banished son. We must indeed die. We are then like water that is poured out on the ground and cannot be gathered up. Yet though God does not bring back to life, he does devise means so as not to banish anyone from him. So obviously God does bring back to life in many ways. After the resurrection, after we're dead and buried and we rise, we've seen him do it with Lazarus, we've seen him do it with Tabitha, we see him do it with all these other individuals, but they're not aware of any of this. This is not the time for any of this. So basically, in her understanding, God is a God that's far away, and our lives are nothing but poured out. And I think that actually comes from one of the Psalms. I should have looked that up. That would have been good to have. But pours out, and then there's nothing else you can do at that point. Because, you take water in a jug and you pour it onto the ground and try to get that water back in the jug. It's not possible. And that's kind of the example here that she's given him. Okay. It does devise. Okay. And now, on verse 15, by the way. And now, if I have presumed to speak to the king of this matter, is because the people have given me cause to fear. And so your servant thought, let me speak to the king. Perhaps he will grant the petition of his servant. And so basically what she's saying is, what she's doing is that she is a wise woman. She's trying to work this in such a way that she can speak to the king in this parable, if you will, and then say, I'm doing this for the good of the king. Because I'm sure the people know that as important as Absalom is to the people, also being one of the warriors for his army and everything else, that people liked him. He was a gentleman who, and if it didn't say it already, I think it's going to come up here and say it in a minute. He was actually another very handsome person. We had Saul, we had King David, and now his son Absalom. Tamar was described also very beautiful in the family. Must run in the family. Beauty runs in the family. Okay. So for the king must sure listen, rescue his servant from the grasp of the one who would destroy both me and my son from the heritage of God. Because where Absalom ran off to, I'm trying to think, I had that in here. Where did he run off to? I'll find it in a minute. I think it comes up actually. It tells us where he comes back from. And your servant says, let the word of my lord the king lead to rest. Indeed, my lord the king is like an angel of God discerning good and evil. The Lord your God be with you. So she's given kind of a blessing through this whole story. God is with you. you're like an angel who can discern good and evil. You'll make the right choice. That's kind of what he's saying, what she's saying to him. Okay, let's go to verse 18. The king answered the woman, now, do not conceal from me anything I may ask you. Okay, so we just turned tables here. What happens now is the king's going, I'm going to figure it out. I think I know what's going on, but let me ask some questions here because I have an idea. So I'm going to ask you, and you go ahead and tell me what I want to know. So she's like, hey, let my lord the king speak. So the king asked her, is the hand of Joab with you in all this? So yeah, he's figured this out. And the woman answered, as you live, my lord the king, it is just as my lord has said, and not otherwise. So it's a long sentence to go, yes. It was your servant Joab who instructed me and told your servant all these things she was to say. Your servant Joab did this in order to approach the matter in a roundabout way. So if you ever want to know if the word roundabout is in the Bible, there it is. Okay. But my Lord is wise with the wisdom of an angel of God, knowing all things on earth. So continually being respectful to the king. Well, you're already tugging at his heartstrings and the passionate kind of person that he is. The last thing you want to do is tick him off. We've seen what happened to some of the individuals who didn't fare so well in that manner. But she says, my Lord is wise with the wisdom of an angel of God, knowing all things on earth. So yes, you're right. And you're absolutely right. Okay. So what happens is Absalom does return. Then the king said to Joab, I am granting this request. Go and bring back young Absalom. And then falling to the ground in homage and blessing the king. Joab said, because big respect to the king. So Joab falls to the ground and says, this day your servant knows that I am in good favor with you. But my lord king, since the king has granted the request of your servant. It's interesting how they do the language in this, and how we can see Joab actually saying, this day your servant knows that I am in good favor with you. It's like trying to convince the king, I'm in good favor with you, right? We're good, David, we're okay here. Uncle David, you're okay, that kind of thing. So Joab then went off to Gishur, excuse me. I've heard it pronounced. I had different programs in here and asking me how to pronounce that word, and I've heard different ones. So Gishur, and brought Absalom to Jerusalem. So Joab does go get him, brings him back, and it doesn't tell me where he went, but it does say that somewhere. It told us further up where he came from. Can I look real quick? You don't care? Just talk amongst yourselves. I want to see where he came from. He went to Gishur. Oh, that's right. Just told me that. Wow. I'm a little slow tonight. Let's see. So let me go back. Okay. There we go. Because it just tells us he went off to Gishur. I'll tell you, the confidence is just building when you hear me do these classes, don't you? All right. And brought Absalom to Jerusalem. But the king, and back, I think that's a family location from where his mother's from, actually. But the king said, let him go off to his own house. He shall not appear before me. Okay, well, we can stop here and give you a 30-minute sermon if we want, because what we have is that David's going, you're right. I need to have Absalom come back. It's been an awful thing. He's been gone for some time. He's my son. Let's get him back here. And when you do, tell him when he gets close to town to take a right and then head off that way. I don't want to see him. Not quite the way of, there's no total forgiveness here at all. So that's, I thought that was interesting. And we're going to see what happens with this as well. Okay. So Absalom.
Do you know what Bethlehem and Jerusalem are called?
Do I know what they're called?
Yes.
Do you? Oh, they're called towns.
They're called the city of David.
Oh yeah, they both are. We talked about that in one of our classes because of the fact of where Jesus would be found, the Savior. In Isaiah, be born to the city of David, and that's where David was born as well, Bethlehem.
And not only that, but because of where the Ark of the Covenant was carried.
Yeah, and that eventually went to, of course, Jerusalem as well. Yeah, thanks, William.
Father Bill was mentioning that last night.
Oh, okay. Well, that's cool. Yeah, because it did bring some confusion because both of those places are cities of David. Very good. So he went off to his house and did not appear before the king. Okay. Verse 25. In all Israel, there was no man more praised for his beauty than Absalom. There it is. There's a description. A handsome man. He's flawless, flawless from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. He's a lady killer. You know, what can you say? And for whatever reason, it's inserted in here. And well, actually, there is a reason. We're going to talk about it in just a minute. But it's giving you a setup. It's letting you know what kind of individual this is. I would imagine as well, and from what we're going to see, his charism is just as high, if well regarded as his looks are as well. So now this is an interesting little part. It says when he shaved his head, as he used to do at the end of every year. So basically, he got a haircut once a year. Linda reminds me of Dan. Dan used to do that. He would get a haircut once a year, and so he would shave his head, and that's really going the long stretch. And he used to do it at the end of every year because his hair became too heavy for him. So he's a soldier. I'm sure he was strong, good looking, flawless. But that hair was so heavy and thick, and they're giving you a description that we're not going to see today, the reason why it's brought in, but we will a little bit in the next week or so, that there's a lot there. And there's a little bit of a scriptural exaggeration, if you will, that the hair weighed 200 shekels according to the royal standard. And a shekel is rather heavy. I thought it would tell me right here, because I just read it earlier. It's a weight used as a commercial standard. Someone said it would be way more, like 70. I don't know if it's like, well, I'm kind of bummed out. I thought maybe it would tell me the weight of it. I should have looked it up. I thought it'd be in the footnotes. But a shekel is supposed to be pretty darn heavy. So it's more than just a coin. So a lot of people think a shekel is just like a coin, but it's more than that. Remember the crown that we talked about last week that David used to put on his head, and they used it in shekels, and they said it was like 75 pounds or something like that. But I don't remember. If anybody wants to go up a little bit further and look, I don't want to take up too much time. It will tell us how much a shekel approximately was at the time. Okay, so anywho, according to the royal standard, by the way, so Absalom had 3 sons born to him, besides a daughter named Tamar, who was a beautiful woman. And of course, that was, as Linda pointed out last week, was also the name of his sister. And just for fun, because it's nice to have some video. Hey, Courtney joined us. Hey, Courtney. We can see.
Hey, Michael, a shekel is 17 grams.
Okay, well, we're not metric in this country. Let's see, how many grams in a pound? Someone asked their phone, and because it did, well, while you do that, I'm going to find this map that shows Absalom's tree. Did I not put it in here? Sometimes you think you're prepared, and then sometimes you're not. Hold on. Here it is. Well, I think it's 4 ounces. Go ahead, Jackie.
I think it's 4 ounces.
Huh. It's 0.6.
0.6 pounds? And how many shekels did it say his hair weighed?
It's 0.6 ounces. Is what it says.
0.6 ounces? That's not very much. So Absalom here has his 2 daughters, Tamar and Maacah, as you pointed out last time, names that have been used before. Okay, so let's go back. I thought it had he has 3 sons also, and I'm wondering why it's not showing the sons. So that's aggravating me. I can do this. Since we're only doing 2 chapters, I'm going to just go right over to here. And I think it's down here. Come here. Come on. It's usually at the bottom. Huh. I thought maybe it would show that. I'm having all kind of trouble tonight. Let's see. Absalom. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. Yeah, there we go. Family tree of Absalom. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, that's why. Because we don't have names. This is 3 other sons. Okay. Absalom, Tamar, Baca, who ends up getting with Rehoboam and having their kids, but this is 3 other sons. That's why. Okay. So he had 3 sons born to him besides a daughter named Tamar, who was a beautiful woman. And so they make the point to share that name because that was the name of his sister as well. So Absalom is pardoned. This is an interesting little end to chapter 14. Absalom lived in Jerusalem for 2 years without appearing before the king. So that's quite a bit of time. Kind of makes you wonder what they did there all the time. Then he sent a message asking Joab to send him to the king. In other words, if you send me, if you instruct me to go, I have to go. And that may, if I can get in front of my father again, I think that would be great. But Joab would not come to him. Although he asked him a second time, Joab still would not come to him. So Absalom's got a plan to get his attention. I cannot recommend you do this at home. He therefore instructed his servants, you see Joab's field that borders mine? How convenient is that? So they're neighbors as well. He says, see where he has all that barley, rising in the field? Go set it on fire. Let's see, maybe that'll get the attention of Joab, and then see if he doesn't want to come down and see what's going on. And he's successful in it. Absalom's servants set the field on fire, and Joab's, let's scroll up a little bit, Joab's farmlands came to him with torn garments. You're getting the sense of how things, what things mean now. The more we do scripture, the tearing of the garments, meaning this is awful. This is just totally a bad situation, that kind of thing. Because I'm pretty sure it wasn't that easy to put this fire out. If it doesn't say how much of the farmland it consumed, but it was not a good thing. And so, and then the farmhands told him, Absalom's servants set your field on fire. Joab's like, what? So Joab went to Absalom in his house. And Joab, Absalom's probably sitting there just sipping coffee going, yeah, he'll be here pretty soon. Yeah, he'll come. And so Joab shows up, knocks on the door and goes, why have your servants set my field on fire? What's the deal? And Absalom tells Joab, I sent you a message. Come here that I may send you to the king to say, why did I come back from Geshur? Excuse me. I would be better off if I were still there. I mean, what's the point? I mean, you came back to get me just to send me off to another town. This doesn't make that much of a difference. I'm still not part of the king's, royal family. I've been set apart. I'm a black sheep now because I killed off my brother who raped my sister, and David still can't forgive me. So he says, I would be better off if I stayed there. Now let me appear before the king. If I am guilty, let him put me to death. So I think part of it was not just that Joab didn't want to go against David's wishes of seeing Absalom, because he did say, okay, bring him back, but then bring him over. I don't want to see him. As much as that he didn't really want to not just upset the king, but also was afraid that what the king might do to Absalom if he did show up and brought him there. Because if the king is still very angry after a couple of years and then was to kill Absalom, then Joab would feel very bad because they are still close to each other. So Joab went to the king and reported this. And so King David then called Absalom. He came to him, and in homage, Absalom fell on his face to the ground before the king. And the king reached over to Absalom and kissed him. And so we now see where Absalom is now welcomed back into Jerusalem. He's welcomed back into King David's home, if you will. Okay? All right, yeah, it's a good thing I only did 2 chapters. All right, so let's do chapter 15. So now, after all this, Absalom got back in his dad's good graces, but not quite without some ulterior motive, if you will. So we're going to see a little bit what's going on here. So after this, Absalom provided himself, because remember, Absalom is a prince, because his dad is king. And so he goes out and says, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get some chariots and horses and a retinue of 50, some warriors and all that. And moreover, Absalom used to rise early and stand alongside the road leading to the gate. So the gate to come into Jerusalem where most people come through. And if someone had a lawsuit to be decided by the king, because that's probably how the king spent most of his day, Absalom would call to him and say, from what city are you? So Absalom's catching all these people as they come in. A really handsome guy, probably very charismatic, and says, so, where are you from? And when they reply, well, your servant is of such and such a tribe of Israel. That's how it actually reads in here. And so Absalom would say to them, your case is good and just. You got a good reason to be here. It's, you could have this even in your favor, but there is no one here. There is no one to hear you in the king's name. And basically what he's doing, he's cutting people off before they get to the king. And he's getting their favor by saying, king isn't here for you. But who's your man? Absalom. Who's your man? Absalom. So he says, if only I could be appointed a judge in the land, then everyone who has a lawsuit to be decided might come to me, and I would render him justice. So we can see Absalom is trying to set himself up to the good graces to as many people in the land that he can. And boy, there's nothing better than leaning on people's times of need and the like to try to get them to be swayed into liking him instead of his dad. So it says here in verse 5, whenever a man approached him to show homage, he would extend his hand, hold him, and kiss him. Well, that's like politicians, ain't it? Shake hands, kiss babies, the kind of thing. By behaving in this way toward all the Israelites who came to the king for judgment, Absalom was stealing the heart of Israel. A very profound statement. So that's what Absalom's trying to do. So I'm here for you. King David's not. And, there was that switch a little bit with Saul and David. Everybody started liking Saul. It was not done in this same fashion. David did not do this. But that's what was happening, getting favor away from the king. So Hebron, conspiracy in Hebron. After a period of 4 years, it took him this long to win, it takes time and information to travel. Absalom said to the king, he said to his dad, please let me go to Hebron and fulfill a vow I made to the Lord. For while living in Geshur and Aram, your servant made this vow. If the Lord ever brings me back to Jerusalem, I will worship him in Hebron. Okay. I should have did a map on Hebron. It's not too far. I don't know if that last map would actually have it in there or not. Want to go peruse? Let's go peruse. There's Heshbon. Let's see. Hebron. There it is down here. See where my finger's pointing? A town where Abraham lived and the burial place of the patriarchs. And so we're getting in the southern area of Canaan. And so that's where he was heading off to. And by the way, we were in Judah territory where Israel is up further north. So that's basically the area from where David came from where Saul came from. And so he's going down into home territory, if you will, and going down there to make himself almost like a king, if you will. So let's keep reading. So he asked the king, the king said to him, well, go in peace. Yeah, if that's what you want to do, and you made a vow that you would go down there and to worship God in Hebron, then go ahead. So then Absalom sent agents throughout the tribe of Israel to say, when you hear the sound of the horn, say, Absalom is king in Hebron. So he's going off to another location and trying to get everybody's attention to recognize him as king. So this isn't going to be good. Verse 11, 200 men had accompanied Absalom from Jerusalem. They had been invited and went in all innocence, knowing nothing. I don't know what to tell you, but that's basically it. They had no clue that Absalom was trying to turn the tables against his own father. So in good favor, they're going with the prince to Hebron, and then all of a sudden things are going to change. Absalom also sent to Ahithophel, the Gileonite, David's counselor, an invitation to come from his town, Gilo, for the sacrifices he was about to offer. So the conspiracy gained strength, and the people with Absalom increased in numbers. So they apparently increased in so many numbers that we're going to see in verse 13 that David's going, oh my gosh, I don't have the favor of Judah anymore. So what's going to happen here? So David, well, I got to admit, he's good at doing this. He did it a lot with Saul. He's going to be fleeing Jerusalem. So an informant came to David with the report, the Israelites have given their hearts to Absalom, and they are following him. And maybe David had something to do with this. I mean, he probably maybe just kind of got laxed, fell out of favor with the people, wasn't paying attention to the people themselves, that kind of thing. So David said to all his servants who were with him in Jerusalem, get up, let us flee, or none of us will escape from Absalom. Leave at once, or he will quickly overtake us, and then bring disaster upon us, and put the city to the sword. So that's a pretty massive turnaround to think that all of a sudden that Absalom's going to have way more people than David would have access to, when you would think about David's army being able to maybe kind of react this, but David doesn't think so. And I'm sure somewhere in David's mind, he's not really wanting to fight his son, if he can help that. So the king's servants answered him, whatever our lord the king chooses to do, we are your servants. So this basically saying, hey, king, whatever, we're there. So the king set out, accompanied by his entire household, except the lucky 10 get to stay behind, right? Except for 10 concubines whom he left behind to care for the palace. Now, he didn't leave any wives behind, but he left 10 of the women behind to take care of the palace and its needs, water the plants, feed the pets. I don't know, whatever reason that's put in place. And God forbid Absalom gets there and goes, well, yeah, I'm not going to have anything to do with those individuals, just wipe them out. So we don't know. As the king left the city with all his officers accompanying him, they halted opposite the ascent of Mount of Olives. I showed a map before. I didn't pull it up, but the Mount of Olives is right outside of Jerusalem and up on a hillside. And so that was on, if I remember correctly, on the east side of Jerusalem. And he's going up that way, leaving Jerusalem. And then they halted. Basically, David halts the opposite of the ascent of the Mount of Olives at a distance, while the whole army marched past him. So if he's got a whole army and they're running away from Absalom, there's got to be a ton of people on Absalom's side to even think about being a real threat to David and his army. So David, goes up from Jerusalem. He turns around. He looks at his kingdom thinking that, well, this might be it. I might not be ever coming back here again, and just kind of watches it as everybody passes him. Okay. So David and Ittai, as all the Sherebites and Pelethites and the 600 Gittites who had entered his service from that city were passing in review before the king. So just give you some names. They're not much really important to really get into. I don't know if they're really mentioned very much, actually. The Cherethites and the Pelethites, King David's personal bodyguards under the command of Benaiah, distinct from the regular army. So these are people that are close to David that protect him personally. Kind of like, you have your Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine thing, but then you got the Secret Service that, maybe tends to certain important people in our country, that kind of thing. So that's what they do. All right. And 600 Gittites, if you want to look at it and see what that says, we can do that. the residents of Goth. So these individuals are actually from a land that was actually Philistine land, and yet are now under the service of David, and who had entered his service from that city were passing in review before the king. So the king said to Ittai, the Gittite, why should you also go with us? And this is why he's saying this. Go back and stay with the king, for you are a foreigner, and you are in exile from your own country. Because again, they're from the Palestine area, the Philistine area, excuse me. You came only yesterday, and today shall I have you wander off with us wherever I have to go? Obviously, yesterday here is I would say a metaphor. It just hasn't been long at all, is what he's trying to say. You know, you haven't been here and grown up through generations with us or anything else, and I'm not going to, and it's been great to have you, but you know, you shouldn't be a part of this battle. So return and take your brothers with you, and may the Lord show you kindness and fidelity. But Ittai answered the king and said, as the Lord lives, great common phrase, isn't it? As my Lord the king lives, your servant shall be where my Lord the king is, whether for death or for life. So he's saying, you know, wherever you are, you're now our king. So wherever you are, we are with our king. So the king said, let me scroll up a little bit. So in verse 22, so the king said to Ittai, go then and march on. In other words, keep going on and march past me, and we shall continue on. To the right, I did pull this up just to look at it real quick. It does say Ittai is a Philistine from Gath, like we just mentioned, but he's also the captain of David's mercenary troops. And it talks about during the revolt of Absalom, Ittai proved utterly loyal to King David, which we just now saw. He later took part as a commander in a battle against the forces of Absalom, which we will see here in 15 and some in 18. Okay. With all his men and all the dependents of the Gittites, all who were with him marched on. The whole land wept aloud as the last of the soldiers went by, and the king crossed the Wadi Kidron. And I guess I was going to pull a map up of this, but that's just basically a river, Kidron, I've shown you before, crossing over that river and on to other places. With all the soldiers moving on ahead of him by the way of the ascent of the Mount of Olives towards the wilderness. Okay. Yeah, we're doing good. We're about done. So David and the priest, Zadok, and if I remember right, he is, I believe, a priestly descendant of Aaron. So he's a Levite through his son Eleazar. He was a son of Ahitub and the father of Ahimaaz. And so he was in charge of the Ark of the Covenant. And during the rebellion of Absalom, which we're reading now, remained loyal to the king and proved himself in dealing with elders of Judah. And there's some other stuff. But okay, so we got the idea of who he is. Take the ark. The king tells Zadok the priest, take the ark of God back to the city. If I find favor with the Lord, he will bring me back and permit me to see it in its lodging place. So if they were going to, actually, I think I just skipped the whole verse of 24. I'm sorry. So Zadok too and all the Levites bearing the Ark of the Covenant of God set down the Ark of God until the whole army had finished marching out of the city, and Abiathar came up. So what they're thinking is that if we're leaving, we're taking the Ark of God with us. And apparently it's very important to David. But David's going, you know what? God can take care of himself in a sense. God, this is where he wants to be. He didn't ask me to take him with me. If God wants me to come back, I'll be coming back. All right. But if, and it says here, but if he should say, I am not pleased with you, I am ready. Let him do to me as he sees fit. So basically just saying, you know, let it be God's will and leave him there. The king also said to Zadok, the priest, look, you and Abiathar return to the city in peace, and both your sons with you, your own son Ahimaaz and Abiathar's son Jonathan, not, of course, the same Jonathan that was killed, that was Saul's son. Remember, I shall be waiting at the fords, you know, the river, near the wilderness until a report from you comes to me. So basically that's where he's going to be hanging out, in the wilderness. And David's done it before. He knows how to hang in the wilderness. So Zadok and Abiathar took the Ark of God back to Jerusalem and remained there. Okay, so as David went up to the ascent of the Mount of Olives, and since all of his army and everybody passed him, so he's following all of them, he wept without ceasing. Well, that way, if you're in the back of the line, nobody can see you crying, I guess. Maybe that was kind of the plan. I don't know. His head was covered, and he was walking barefoot. But all those who were with him also had their heads covered and were weeping as they went. Many times we've seen here, even just the last couple of chapters, how when David responds in a certain fashion, the people respond with David. It's just showing a great loyalty that they have with him, and hurt for him as well, and rejoice with him when he rejoices. When David was told Ahithophel is among the conspirators of Absalom, he said, "Oh Lord, turn the counsel of Ahithophel to folly." Basically, hopefully that will not pass the way it should, because David uses Ahithophel as a counselor, and so he's hoping that that doesn't actually work out like like Absalom wants it to. And it says up here again, a respected counselor in the court of King David. Ahithophel was originally from the town of Gilo in Judah and enjoyed a position of influence at the court. He turned his back on the king, however, and became a leading figure in the rebellion. And so we're going to read more about that as well. Let's see. Okay. So David and Hushai. When David reached the top where God was worshipped, Hushai the Archite was there to meet him with garments torn and dirt upon his head. David said to him, "If you come with me, you will be a burden to me," because he wanted to go with him. "But if you return to the city and say to Absalom, 'Let me be your servant, O king. I was formerly your father's servant, but now I will be yours. You will thwart for me the counsel of Ahithophel.'" So he's telling him it'd be a better idea if you just go ahead and stay back, and it might help this whole situation. "You will have the priests Zadok and Abiathar there with you. You will hear if you hear anything," so it's almost like a spy situation too. "If you hear anything from the king's house, you shall report it to the priests Zadok and Abiathar, who have there with them their 2 sons. So Zadok's son Ahimaaz and Abiathar's son Jonathan. Through them you shall send on to me whatever you hear." So David's still got a plan going on here. He's not just leaving. He's not just retreating, but he wants to know what's going to be happening. So David's friend Hushai went into the city, Jerusalem, as Absalom was about to enter it. Dun, dun, dun. And that pretty much ends where we were going to talk about today. And it's 7:55, so we did pretty good. There's a lot of people listed in these 2 chapters, and we try to get a hang on and know who they are. But I think we kept it all straight. But anybody, that concludes it for the week. Anybody have any questions? I hope I can hear you. That was the plan of using these. And yet I hear nothing. Maybe nobody's saying anything.
I saw Mr. Minnie the other day driving down the road.
Okay.
He
Cool.
was going to get rechecked for that COVID.
Oh boy. Yeah, that's where we are now. COVID land. Yeah, I heard you can go up to CVS now and request a test, and you don't need a doctor's note or anything.
I got checked Monday. I'm negative.
Oh, good.
I
Awesome.
did that just to double sure.
Yeah.
Which I knew I didn't have it, because with my immune system, if I had it, I would have known it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, hope everybody stays healthy, though. Anybody else?
I have a question, Deacon.
Yeah.
Just, why do you think Absalom turned on his dad?
He rebuked him for killing his other son, his half brother. So I know he was very upset about that. And I was mentioning earlier, the son that the son, or Absalom's half brother that he killed, would have more than likely in David's mind been his heir.
Okay.
And so when family kills family, he's probably pretty upset, I'm sure. So I that's what I would presume.
Yeah, it just seemed like things were going to be okay once he let him back in, once he forgave him.
Right.
And Absalom, he's next in line, right?
Actually, Chileab, and then Absalom.
okay.
Absalom's third.
We don't hear much about Chileab right now, right?
Yeah, we're going to.
Okay.
I would like to find that and see what it says about him. If I can spell it correctly. You got to admit, he's got one of the most cool names. Chileab.
There he is. Chileab.
Okay. Of Abigail, the wife of, I don't know, the third Absalom, son of Maacah, who was the daughter of Tom. I don't know if that's the right one. Sons were born to David. Hebron first name. I was looking for a little bit more information than that. The second son, Chileab of Abigail, the wife of Nabil of Carmel.
No.
The third son was Absalom. Okay, I'm reading it right now. That's my bad. Basically, it read like this. The second son was Chileab of Abigail, the wife of Nabal of Carmel, and the third son was Absalom. So yeah, he was the second one.
Okay.
And what happens to the boy? Not exactly sure. I can actually find a little bit more out by clicking on this and then putting in. David's second son and his first son of Abigail, Chileab was. I think we're getting some feedback from. There we go. David's second son and his first son with Abigail. Chileab was born at Hebron in Chronicles, and he is also called Daniel. Huh. I thought it would give me a little bit more information about what happens to him, because I think something does happen to him. So we'll see that later. Because remember how David was cursed after taking on Bathsheba, killing her husband,
Right.
Yeah.
Uriah the Hittite, and it wasn't just the fact that he lost his newborn son, but he was going to lose fourfold. And I believe he's going to be one of them. But we shall see. I really thought it would give me more than that. Okay. That's okay. I got to do some more research and find out later. Anything else? It's kind of like a soap opera, you know. What's going to happen next?
Mhm.
I know you left us on a cliffhanger.
I know. It would have taken a while to get through 16.
Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah, well, it's only 23 verses, but, you know, it still continues on from there as well. We still got issues with Ahithophel and Absalom and Ahithophel in chapter 17 and Absalom. So we're going to go through a lot more dialogue in the next couple of chapters. That's for sure.